very quickly, minute and a half, 2 minutes each, introduction on what you do, your name, etc. Please.
Perfect. Hi, I'm Noyan Nihat, CEO of Transactive. We're a Lithuanian and UK-based e-money licensed institution. We're in the payment space, and we specialize in real-time payments globally.
Hi, I'm Arturo González. I'm the CEO of Eurobits Technologies. Eurobits is a Spanish company based in Madrid. We were the first company in Europe to provide account aggregation and payment initiation services. We've been doing this for well over 15 years. A long time before anybody was thinking about PSD2. So basically we are in the payment space for two reasons, because account aggregation is considered payments. It's an information service, but related to payments, and because we're also in the payment initiation space.
Thank you. Before I introduce myself, I'd like to say welcome to Istanbul and enjoy Istanbul on a good spring day. My name is Dündar Özdemir. I am the CEO of Wirecard Turkey. Wirecard Global is one of the leading specialists of any electronic payments, issuing and acquiring everything globally. And I am the CEO of Wirecard Turkey, which is 100% owned by Wirecard, an e-money licensed and payment service company in Turkey.
So, obviously the panel is about transfers and payments, and, payments have gone through quite a wild ride recently with, the emergence of crypto. And, there isn't a company out there that is not looking at crypto, maybe positively, maybe negatively. Some are very pessimistic about it, some are very optimistic about it. But, nonetheless, it's playing a role, not in mainstream yet, but it'll come there. And payments itself seems to be the de facto thing that everyone goes for when they start up a fintech company, mostly. It's considered the lowest hanging fruit. In fact, it's not even considered a low hanging fruit. It's considered fruit on the ground. So there's not even an effort required. You just have to pick it up. So let's start with that. Is payments really the main driver for fintech these days? We'll start with you.
Yes, payment was and now is and will continue to be at the center of the fintech. While evolving, while finance and technology evolving, payment will be always the main driver. Not only for financial and technology, but also payment will be also key driver for some game changer businesses, like app stores, for example, Apple App Stores or Google Play Store, or some game-changing marketplaces like Uber, like Airbnb, even Airbnb. Without easiness on the payment of these giant billion-dollar businesses, they couldn't reach that stage. The easiness of payment is always not bringing only fintech, but also game-changing technology. Let me give a tiny example for the importance of payment methods. Suppose that you have a content, or you generate a content, for example, an astrology content, or even it can be a sport news, and you would like to monetize it. Without using the right payment methods, you cannot monetize very well. You can only monetize by getting advertisement or maybe sponsorship. But if you use the right payment model, for example, if you use carrier billing, the most convenient payment methods, the end users only send a short SMS and make the purchase. So you can easily reach millions of people and make millions of dollars with this payment method. And this is a proved business case. We have been providing that solution in Turkey to our merchants more than 10 years, and that is successful. Payment, to your question again, yes, payment is still pioneer in fintech.
But many issues, right, still in the industry with respect to payments. So how about your view? You've been in the view longer than anyone else, I guess.
Yes, or with a specific niche application. So payments is very wide. in terms of segments of population, types of payers and payees, businesses, individuals, etc. But in general, financial services are regulated, and there are certain services that you cannot provide unless you have a specific type of license. In the payment space, you can provide some services without having license, and those that require a license is probably the easiest license to obtain. So that makes it very attractive. Plus, payment services are something that everybody needs. So not everybody needs an investment fund or somebody helping them manage their stock portfolio, but everybody needs to make a payment sometime. So in terms of the audience, it's massive. In terms of regulation, is the easiest financial space to access, but what that is driving probably a very heterogeneous space. So every day you see a new payment mechanism, a new payment system, a new wallet. So at some point, I think probably you have a better view on this, but at some point I think we're going to see some concentration, because one of the beauties about payments is being able to pay with the same mechanism everywhere, whereas many of the payment mechanisms are local. And
Oh, yeah.
Doesn't leave me much to say now, but I would agree with you. I think we were talking about this the other day. There's 1.7 billion unbanked individuals in the world, and that's growing.
That's about 2 billion if you say 2.5 billion if it's unbanked and underbanked.
Underbanked, yeah. But unbanked, you've got those two segments. So I think fintechs are realizing that space is a huge opportunity. And I think we're fooling ourselves if we don't think it's customer driven. So, fintechs are basing themselves around payments. We're becoming, in many countries, a cashless society. ATMs in certain places like Africa don't even exist, or if you can find one, you'll be lucky to. So, things like e-wallets and different methods of payments are becoming stronger and stronger. And then you have the flip side of where people are used to having all types of payment channels. And then you look at real-time payments. And so it's not just doing a payment in 3 days, it's now doing a payment in 10 seconds. And where does that then evolve as time goes on? But yeah, it's regulated space. We all have to work within the same regulations and laws. But I do think fintech is driven by payments for sure.
Here's a little bit of statistics for you. There are about 1,900 payment systems in the world. If you count banking as one, American Express as 2, Visa as 3, and so forth, 1,900. And less than 3% are connected. If you look at the transaction set, cash is 1, debit card is 2, credit card is 3, LC is 4, check is 5. There are 450 transaction sets in the world. And not a single bank in the world offers all 450, by the way. And you mentioned something that is very close to my heart. Someone needs to make a payment every now and then. An average human will make about 65,000 payments in their lifetime. 65,000, think about that. So payment is a low-hanging fruit. And you mentioned, because you said you were licensed as an EMI in Lithuania, which brings us to the European regulation. How is that shaping up as far as payment regulations are concerned? There are two particular geographies that are very interesting. One is Singapore, because they seem to be at the forefront of doing something really spectacular. And one is Europe, from where we all take our cues. Maybe you want to speak about how the European regulations are shaping payments?
Yeah, I mean, it's progressing. I mean, I promised not to use the B word, but I'll have to now, with Brexit looming. So at the moment, we have a Lithuanian license to begin with, and we also have one in the UK for
safety.
For safety, yeah. So really cheap to go down that route. So we have 2 EMI licenses, and
but there's no price difference between the two. It's the same thing
within
the European fabric, right?
Same. I have to be honest. The Lithuanian regulators were much harder to please and to apply for compared to the UK. I think the UK is well practiced and versed in it. It was a quicker process. In Lithuania, it took almost twice as long. So it was interesting from that point of view, and the Bank of Lithuania, very, very progressive, allowing e-money license institutions to access it directly.
Yeah, which basically means in simple English that you are allowed to access the SEPA payment system directly and have a ledger entry with the Bank of Lithuania.
With a, yeah.
So you don't need a bank per se to hold on to your...
We don't. So from that perspective, you're also making applications. So things like SEPA Inst, Target 2 is also approved by the European Central Bank. So you have that element to it. So it's pretty unique. Something like the UK, on the other hand, you end up using an intermediary bank, a clearing bank, though now the Bank of England have now accepted...
It's difficult to find intermediary banks for if you're classified as an MSP.
Correct. So you'll be talking to people like Clearbank, Starling, as an example, Rails Bank, yes, who interestingly have now made a direct application. So I think they go live this month directly with the Bank of England, which we are in the line to do, but we can't get a spot until 2021. So it shows how many people have made the application now to do that in the UK. But no, the European passport is working really well. It's very robust. We can still use it in the UK for the next 6 months, regardless of Brexit. There's an extension for 2 years that's available. Unfortunately for UK EMIs, there's no such return favour, so most of them will stop trading unless they find someone else.
Toro, because you use the European...
Yeah, well, but first I'd like to comment about the things that were said earlier. So I'm surprised about Lithuania because my understanding is that the Lithuania holds the largest number of
second largest EMIs in the world.
Of licenses.
Second largest after UK.
Okay. So I thought that the main reason was because it was
easier. They've also gone through a de-risking, delicensing process right now after post-Revolut, Google, and Barclays opening offices. So that number is going to decrease. But yeah, second largest EMIs.
Okay. And regarding the lawmaking process in Europe, I think we are. I'm not sure if it's the best way. But first, because the regulation process in Europe is very long. And that creates lots of uncertainty for existing businesses.
How long when you say long?
Well, conversations about PSD2 started in 2007.
But that's from a law perspective, right? Not from an applicant perspective.
No. Obtaining a license has its difficulties. But it's a reasonable process. We're licensed. We applied in July, even before PSD2 was transposed to Spanish law, and we have the license since February. Mm-hmm. So it's a reasonable. So in theory, it's 3 months, but the NCAs act like a chess player. When they ask you for something, they stop the clock.
So I don't know if you know, there's a law across in the EMI licensing process and the API licensing process that every time they ask you a question, you can get a 6-month extension automatically on your licensing process.
In theory, you need a positive or negative response by the authorities in 3 months after application. But the time, the clock stops when they request, well, you're missing this, or clarify this, and the clock stops. And they're not, sometimes they're not asking easy questions. Yeah. For instance, in our case, we've been delayed because there was no company offering an insurance policy with the wording that the Central Bank of Spain was requiring. So what was good enough for the FCA was not good enough for the Bank of Spain, and that took us months. But then another thing that I want to comment is that the term passporting is misleading. There isn't such a thing as passporting in Europe. You don't get a passport. You get the right to apply for visas.
Yes.
Because a passport would allow me, so I have a passport, which is the Spanish passport, and then I can go to any country. It doesn't work that way. I have to apply for, although it's not called that way, I have to apply for a visa in every country, and that has an administrative burden. It's not as high as obtaining a license, of course, but you have to say, I want to go to this country, and this country, and each one has its own administrative burden.
You know, you got to admit, passporting sounds cool. Right?
Yeah, it sounds cooler, yeah.
I mean, we on that, I remember it, but it only took us a month to do the passport.
Well, it's a process
visa
nonetheless.
But it's a process, but then, then some would send us emails, some didn't bother, so we'd have to call them and say, did you get our request? But it wasn't as tough as making the application.
No, of course.
As I said, it was a 3-month process with the UK. Lithuania took us almost 5.5, 6 months. They were just much more thorough, believe it or not, than the UK regulator was.
But Dara, you operate in two territories because you have to operate with the wire card, which is regulated in the EU, and then you have the local regulator. So maybe you want to give a little bit of comparison of what you've seen as far as the ease of doing business maybe in Turkey with respect to regulations. Even?
It's complicated, Turkish side, but Wirecard itself is operating in 26 countries in 5 continents, in North of America and South Africa, in New Zealand, Asia, and Turkey as well. Turkey is one of them, and Turkey itself has some specific regulations. We call it on-soil regulations. Everything should be on-soil in Turkey. Maybe you know that PayPal is not available in Turkey because they didn't invest in Turkey. Wirecard is available because Wirecard acquired a company, Microödeme, and didn't bring anything from Germany. Everything has been established in Turkey. The regulations has been announced in 2013, and the license has been started in 2015, and we obtained it in 2016, the e-money license. Now, around 50 companies has license. 15 of them have the e-money, 35 have the
remittance licenses and the other licenses.
Exactly. My team in Turkey, we are mostly focused on Turkish market, Turkish user, Turkish merchants. But in some cases, like travel, the end user can be out of Turkey, but the merchant is in Turkey. For example, the hotel is in Turkey and the visitor will be from Europe. We can figure out that solutions. But we need to always convince the government to bring new payment methods to Turkey. For example, the Chinese giants, the Chinese payments, Alipay, WeChat, we cannot offer them in Turkey. Wirecard itself is the first integrator of Alipay in Europe. And all of Europe has been covered by Alipay payment by Wirecard, but not yet Turkey. But it is, we see that the regulatory authority is open to onboard new payment methods if we obey the rules of the regulations. This also a thing. Yes, there are struggles on that, but it's not impossible.
But Wirecard is in so many countries and you have a very fluid system, but when it comes to Turkey, it seems, everyone that goes into a licensing application with BSRA, they have to, really give up a lot.
Yeah.
So do you sort of go back to the regulator and say, the ease of business is not there?
Actually, we don't have much difficulties because we already had for 10 years business. We have 3 main verticals. One, carrier billing, which I mentioned before. We are operating all Apple, Spotify, Facebook, League of Legends, all the digital content with cell phone, the mobile invoices. And the regulations doesn't have anything to do, anything against it to offer that solution to foreign merchants like Facebook, Apple. We already figured out it. The e-money part is, and the second vertical which we have is credit card acceptance services, which is 100% dependent on local banks and also the card schemes. We are just followers. We cannot make ads, much value adds. We cannot differentiate ourselves from other competitors in that market, and the profitability is very low. Therefore, some of the license company gave up. It is hard to survive at that market. Thanks to our other verticals, we can do it, but it is very hard to survive on the credit card services. The third vertical which we have is the e-money license part, the wallet part. We see a huge potential on that because that part is independent part from the local banks. We can, thanks to the regulations, we can onboard the users 100% online, and we can do the KYC online. That's the basic advantage of us. For example, here we are now in Beşiktaş venue. Beşiktaş has a mobile app, official app. In that there is a wallet. that wallet is provided by us. We can work with them without working with a local acquirer or MasterCard or Visa. That's the good point from the BRSA.
So let's talk about one thing about which is really another thing that's coming more and more is real-time payments. You know, we can send a picture of cat photos to anyone over here, and all I need is your WhatsApp address, and I can send you my dog or cat photo. But we can't send money like this. Why aren't real-time payments becoming a reality, especially for cross-border? I'll start with you.
I think they are.
Well, how many real-time payment systems do you know that exist across the world that are ubiquitous?
So we've identified at least 20, which I know doesn't sound a lot, but it's a start. So at the moment, we're connected to the UK faster payment scheme, which is one of the original ones. SEPA Inst, which came out, I guess, last year.
Yeah.
And then by the summer, we're going to be, I think, the first non-American company to be connected to the real-time payment platform in the United States. Now, they all have different issues.
The same day ACH, you mean?
No, real-time.
In the US?
In the US, yeah. Yeah, I'll send you a document on it.
Wow.
So that launched back in November 2017. About 80% of the banks.
Oh, the Zelle, that's what you're talking about. The JP Morgan led, the Wells Fargo led consortium and so forth.
Well, it's Clearinghouse do it, Jack Henry do it, but it's a whole federal-wide real-time payment. So that was provided by Vocalink with the
which is the UK one, a provider.
The UK one, yeah. So in the US, we'll be able to do transactions under 1 minute. Now, there's a $25,000 cap. As you probably know, in Europe, I think it's a 15,000 euro cap, and that's a 10-second transaction. So the US
SEPA wasn't real time till now, recently. Right?
Well, last year.
They demoed it, I think by the last ERPP meeting was by the end of November.
Yeah,
so now the Target 2 is the thing that's coming, all right?
But yeah, Target 2 is a different.
SCTs.
Yeah, but SEPA Inst has been around. The problem is only 50% of the European countries have adopted it. So we can make those payments where they're active. Again, that has a cap of 15,000 euros. So the UK, obviously, with a 250,000 cap, is much more robust. Australia has it. India has it. I think Turkey actually does have a system.
Yes, but it
similar
closes at 5 p.m. Do you know that?
Yeah. So that's some of the issues. I mean, for us, we're connecting to ones that are 24/7. So at the moment, we're active in Europe, the UK, by the summer in the US, but our system allows people to access our very easy API, and you can do 24/7, 365. And we've even had banks, British banks, approach us to say, can we tap into your API? Because Barclays Bank, and you can Google this, it's quite funny. So last year, out of 52 weekends, they were under maintenance for 38.
Yeah, they were. Right,
38 weekends, shuts down, absolutely shuts down. This is Barclays Bank. So when you think of bank holidays and Christmas Day,
so Barclays has a holiday pretty much every fortnight.
Pretty much all the time. So I think there's a future in real-time payments. As I said, it's Brazil's another actually hot place for real-time payments. It's growing and it will continue to grow. We're finding clients either care about it or don't. It really depends.
When did faster payments debut?
Faster payments, I think it's almost 11 years old now.
Do you know the first country in the world to have real-time payments across all the banks? Singapore. Just FYI.
There you go.
What about Turkey? I mean, you know, it's really, I don't know, almost hilarious at times that you have to come over here and say, oh, but you know, we shut our switch down at 5 p.m. You know, we don't do real-time payments after that.
And we, like SEPA, so forth, and we have the real-time payments on credit card. And the payment landscape of Turkey is very much, the online payment is dominated by credit cards, different than the European markets. And credit card and debit cards is number one in Europe. There are more than 200 million of cards in pockets everywhere. And we are trying as fintechs to penetrate the alternative real-time payments on the markets. But now If you look at the market share on all of the landscape of payments, 99% from the credit cards, online credit card payments.
Yes, I wanted to mention that in Europe, Europe failed miserably at having its own card scheme. So,
yes, there is no PayPal of Europe, right? I mean, or a local payment. They're already pockets, right? Every country has its own
so
thing.
basically, the three card schemes, Visa, MasterCard, and American Express, they're all American. And Europe tried to have its own scheme, and it didn't work out. So now the European authorities are trying to shift payments to wire transfers based on instant payments to compete with credit cards. And there's actually an initiative by the European Central Bank, which is called the SEPA Access Scheme, which is trying to give a scheme approach to API access to banks, which I'm proud to co-chair with a guy from Deutsche Bank. The problem is the political and economical incentives. So Europe wants to have its own payment mechanism to compete with the American card schemes, but at the same time, the European banks are making big profits from using.
Well, you put your colleague on the left out of business if you do that, right?
No, because he would be offering the payment initiation services just as he does. So I understand that one of the main competitive advantages that companies like Wire can have is the contact with the merchants. So they are now offering credit cards. They would at some point be offering payment initiation. Probably they do in Europe, not in Turkey, because unfortunately it's not possible. Yeah. My understanding is, and this was probably for the previous question, my understanding is that although data protection laws are similar in Turkey than they are in Europe, and that was the base for account aggregation and payment initiation to be possible before PSD2 entered into force in Europe. But I understand that there's a local banking regulation in Turkey that forbids banks to share data with other parties. And that.
So you asked that question. Maybe we can get an answer from someone in the audience that knows about this. Not now, but later. You know that there is a Turkish law that prevents.
Basically, payment initiation would be that they would be able to offer the end user a payment mechanism by which, instead of typing a credit card number or dragging it from an application, they would select the bank they work with, they would enter the credentials, the second authentication factor, and they would do a payment from their account. And if instant payments were available, that payment would be instantaneous and non-reversible.
This is Sofortüberweisung in Germany is much more 60%, or ideal in Netherlands is more than 75%, or it's increasing rapidly. In Turkey, there is one, Compay, a startup, which provides the similar solution, but they are a fintech, not a bank, and it is hard to compete with the credit card. The Turkish, for the Turkish market, installment is very crucial.
It's like the Brazilian thing, right?
This is similar, the Brazilian, and I think it's in Greece as well, not but in Germany, in Europe, the west of Europe. Therefore, such payment methods didn't work online. Yes, for only micropayment for digital goods, yes, carrier billing works, but for e-commerce, and 99% Visa and MasterCard, maybe 1% American Express. So that's.
Nayan, I want to ask you something. You know, transfers are evolving into faster and more, cost-efficient environments. How and why? Because, as a licensee holder, you have the option of both plugging into legacy systems, and needless to say, you obviously want a tech advantage and, offer more real-time payments.
Yeah. Well, we actually avoid legacy systems as much as we can. So no, we're API-led. We're a fraction of the cost. I mean, the banks have had a monopoly, okay, and now with open banking, PSD2, it's opened up the market. We as a fintech, it's taken us 2 years to build our platform. It has a portal for those who still operate legacy, but it's API-led, and it's giving us the ability to offer real-time payments, flexible on timings and speed. at a fraction of the price that the banks do. And we do cross-border as well. We were talking about this only yesterday. We can do a transfer from Bulgaria to Canada. Quickest we've done is about an hour. The slowest we've done is a day and a half. We don't use SWIFT. We're anti-SWIFT, and we don't need SWIFT. We don't need those legacy systems, and that's the way we're pushing forward. And we're finding clients are grabbing it with both hands. And when you think that a transfer for most, and I'm doing this in, let's say, Canadian dollars or US dollars, it's between $30, $35 for an overseas transfer. We do it for less than $1. So you go and put that out there in the marketplace.
Yeah, I mean, I had a colleague who did a slow clap when the lady from Swift said, we can do a transfer on the new blockchain and we'll do it in 24 hours. And they almost clap. But, it's obviously faster, better, cheaper. How do you make money on that? I mean, the downward pressure would be too much, no?
No, I mean, we have an FX partner. I guess we're either very generous, I don't know. We don't make money on the FX. We have an FX partner that's integrated to our platform. They make money on the FX. We do it on volume of transactions. Okay. So it's really the volume of transactions is what we're looking for. So we look at, yeah, the sort of the gig economy, payroll, short-term lending. We handle crypto because we have permission to do so. Licensed gaming. So it's quite widespread. Insurance is a massive sector for us as well. Mm-hmm. Insurance payouts. You can imagine the customer journey. Customer making a claim by the time he's put the phone down, the money's in the account, 10 seconds flat. So that's domestically, obviously. Cross-border. We've connected with other PSPs in Europe who need to move funds into dollars or back into euros. And on that, we just charge a percentage of the value. But again, it's about the speed of movement and the flexibility where traditional banks just can't provide that.
So I'll ask a question, 2 parts. What excites you most, and what do you think of blockchain? Let's start with you.
It is obvious that blockchain will affect the financial technologies. And I see blockchain as a disruptive technology, mostly to the traditional finance landscape, including the card schemes, the banks. But if the regulatory authority allows or lead it. But I see some other technologies like AI or IoT will much more effective on financial technologies. From the perspective of Turkey, about blockchain, it depends on the regulation, let's say. Without regulations, there won't be any potential. But if the regulation allows it or makes some rules about it, it will first affect the card schemes, I think. But right. It will bring many big opportunities for us to Fintech startups or Fintech companies, especially e-money license holders.
Toro.
Well, I think first, for starters, I think that blockchain is, I've been in the financial services, IT side of the industry for around 30 years, and I think that by far blockchain is the most overhyped term that I've ever heard, which is not to say that it's not valuable, but the application of blockchain is limited, so it's not going to solve the world hunger problem like it seems. But I think payments is particularly one of the places where it has an application, because at the end, blockchain is a public distributed ledger. So most of the applications are either not public or not distributed, so it doesn't make any sense to apply such a complex technology. But on the other hand, although I think it applies to payments, it's so complex. I think one of every 10,000 people that talks about blockchain really understands it. So the implications are potentially massive, and I think that the regulators have to be extremely careful and vigilant with blockchain, because the implications, if it's not rolled out correctly, can be massive.
What excites you about payments?
I think we're in a transitional phase where let's say, legacy payments like credit cards are being questioned by many, and what excites me is mainly competition, what goes back to your previous question about driving costs down. Most of the payment industry has been acting as a monopoly or as a cartel for decades. Now you have competition from everywhere, from companies like Alipay, from payments through banking accounts, to telco operators, cashless payments, whatever. So what excites me more is that competition is going to make this industry more efficient.
Sir, what about you? Blockchain, and what excites you about payments?
I'm not one of the 10,000 that actually understands it. I get it. I think it's going to be around. It has its applications. We as a company are not big fans of it. So we don't support it or get involved in it. But I don't think we will go down that route. We've considered it.
Never say never, though.
Well, you never say never. But I mean, it's not going to go away, okay? And it's going to be around. And I agree, actually. I think in payments it has an application. But for us, we took a strategic decision to not go down that route.
So I don't know if you know the FATF, which is the Financial Action Task Force. The presidency right now is under the U.S. government, and it's there for another 3 months or so. And they've made it a life mission that before their presidency is over, which is another 3 months, that the first set of FATF guidelines for cryptocurrency would come out. That means every country would have to adhere to that. And that's about 180 members that would have to adhere to that or lose access to dollar clearing or euro clearing or pound clearing. So crypto, I guess the regulations are right around the corner. But anyways, we have a few minutes left because we went 15 minutes over, and that's what we'll get. Any questions from the audience? No question? Okay, how about you guys make up a question? Okay, there you go.
Thank you very much. My question is about SEPA instant credit transfers. Currently, the coverage is quite limited. Is there any deadline for joining to SEPA instant credit transfer for all participant banks and also electronic money institutions or payment service providers? Because when we look at the SEPA side, there were some deadlines in the past which all member banks have to complete their process and join the system. There were some delays, but at the end, all banks joined this one. What about SEPA instant credit transfers?
My understanding is that it's in a voluntary phase, but I can check it out, and I'll exchange cards with you, and we'll give you a detailed answer to that. But my understanding is that it's voluntary, and there's only about 50 European banks out of 7,000 that have adhered to ICT Inst.
I think there's a soft date. I recall seeing a date somewhere, but it probably was more of a target.
Yes, I think it's not compulsory, but you do have national, let's say, schemes of instant payments. For instance, many using the phone as a proxy. That has limitations because you can't link more than one account to the same phone number. But most countries are banks are rolling out a common framework for paying through the phone in an instant way, but very limited quantities. I think it's like 6,000 euros or something like that.
Any other question? Quick question from me. Do you think SEPA will allow external payment systems to connect to it through member banks? You may have a very designated, let's say, payment system in, let's say, Turkey, and you could have a Turkish bank, connect to the SEPA through a member bank, let's say Deutsche, and suddenly SEPA can clear payments between the two systems.
That's a difficult question.
I mean, that's the end goal, right? I mean, the unified fabric.
There's SEPA and the European Union are not the same thing. There are non-European Union countries that have adhered to SEPA. I don't know if Turkey is one of them.
Not yet.
But so there certainly is a possibility for that to happen. I don't know what the limitations are, or if there are political conditions or whatever, but
I'm not sure about a local Turkish bank, but as far as I know, as an e-money institute, I cannot do anything because of the BaFin rules, because of the SEPA regulations as a Turkish entity, because we are out of European Union yet. And the answer is no, as far as I know.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the solution would be on that. I mean, we're talking to companies globally, even in Turkey, so we can issue IBANs, I guess, allow them to deposit in euros, and then they have access to the SEPA scheme.
Any other questions? Don't be shy, you can ask. Anyone? Hakan, how about you ask a question? No? Sure.
My question for Lithuania about digital onboarding. Currently, your legislation fully allows you to make digital onboarding electronically, or still need to get some wet signature on application documents or contracts, agreements from clients? Because in Turkey, we still have to get some wet signatures, which is cumbersome for our sector. What about Lithuania?
No, we use digital.
Sorry?
Everything is digital for us.
But that's across Europe. So there are a number of systems that are validated for digital onboarding. One is there's a SEPA message for doing KYC, but the problem is that banks more or less have agreed that the response time of that SEPA message is going to be 3 days. So in practice, it's not real time, not valid for real time digital onboarding. Then you have the video system, and there's a third one which I don't remember which one it is. So there are a number of, and you can have bespoke systems approved by the local competent authorities, and then that could be translated to the European Union countries. So it wouldn't be necessarily different in Lithuania. What would be different in Lithuania, which would be equivalent to Spain, is I think it's one of the 2 countries that have a smart card-based electronic ID system, and that would definitely be valid for digital onboarding. The problem is most computers don't have a slot to put that card into, and so it's only accessible to a very small fraction of the population.
No more questions. Well, Noyan, Arturo, Lunda, thank you very much. I know you have a flight to catch.
Thank you
Round
very
of
much.
applause, please, and I'll hand it up to you.
Thank you.